Well, welcome back to our study of the book of Ruth. This is just week 2, really our only second day into the text itself. And what we've already seen in the book of Ruth is bad news. Elimelech, the husband, whose name means literally God is king, has chosen to lead his family away from the promised land, away from his inheritance, away from Bethlehem, the house of bread, and lead them to Moab, to the land of distant cousins, loosely related through Lot, Abraham's nephew. There he dies. There, his 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, marry local women. Not a complete violation of scriptural principles since they are loosely related, but yet the boys also die, indicating they're perishing away from the Lord. They're in exile, a self-imposed exile. And we're left with Naomi and the 2 daughter-in-laws trying to survive together through all this turmoil, through all this bad news. This morning, we pick up in chapter 1, verse 6, and we'll read on through the middle part of the chapter and follow what's happening today. Then she, being Naomi, verse 6, arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab. For she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. So she set out from the place where she was with her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, Go, return each of you to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, No, we will return with you to your people. But Naomi said, Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that may become your husbands? Turn back, daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. Then they lifted up their voices and they wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, Naomi, See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. And so, the men in the story are dead. They've proven if unfaithful, if we can be that bold, they've certainly died in their lack of trust in God by going to Moab. He took care of the situation the way he thought best, and Elimelech and his 2 sons have died there, leaving the women in the story. And as so often happens in the Bible with a plot twist, in this case, the men have looked bad so far, the women look good. And while we knew little of Naomi before this point in the story, now we begin to get hints, indications of what she's like as a woman, as a mother-in-law, about her faith and how it impacted those around her. And so, verse 6 begins with Naomi having heard a rumor that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. Naomi has heard somehow that the famine has ended back in the promised land, that God has shown divine favor on the Israelites in that part of the world and given them food. The very reason for their fleeing is now over, and she can return home. And so it says in verse 7 that she and the daughter-in-laws set out from that place to return to the land of Judah. The picture is both Naomi and the girls are heading back to Naomi's homeland. But, verse 8, it dawns on Naomi that the daughter-in-laws shouldn't go with her. They don't have to go. And so she implores of them in verse 8 to return to their family, to their mother's house. She also invokes a blessing upon them. May the Lord deal kindly with you. Why does she care so much about these girls? As you have dealt with the dead and with me. The girls were devoted to their husbands, and since their death, they've been devoted to Naomi. There's this idea of loving their neighbor as themselves. And so Naomi wishes the best for them. May the Lord deal kindly with you. Verse 9, the prayer continues. The Lord grant that each of you find rest, that you find shalom, that you might be able to find peace. But notice here then this inclusion in verse 9 of where she hopes they find rest one day. Each of you in the house of her husband. Now, of course, their initial husbands are dead. What Naomi envisions is that they'll return to their families, return to their people, will remarry again, and praying that God will bless them with a healthy, happy marriage where their husbands are alive and not dead. And so not only do we get a picture of the Hebrew view of weddings and marriage, but also you get a picture of just how angst-ridden Naomi's life must be at this point. Her prayer for the daughters is that God will bless and give them peace. She has no peace. That he'll give them peace in the houses of their husbands. She has no husband. And so she wishes for them what she does not herself enjoy any longer, that God will bless them with husbands who will bring them all that they need and desire. But the girls don't respond quite the way Naomi anticipated. She kissed them to say farewell, and they lifted up their voices and they wept. They loved Naomi. This is not a situation of the mother-in-law is evil. They love their mother-in-law. And the idea of living without her is heartbreaking. Now, compounded, of course, with the fact that they've all lost their husbands. There's probably been a closeness, a bond between them because of that common experience. But the clear reality is they love Naomi and they're going to miss her. And so they said to her in verse 10, "No, we'll return with you to your people. We'll go with you." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters," and then goes into a long discussion of rhetorical questions with them about, if you go back with me, who will you marry? Nobody back home is going to marry a Moabite. I'm not going to bring up any more young boys who are going to be able to marry you to follow the Levite law about marrying the siblings' children should the one decease. She says, I have no other children. Even if I were to get married today, there's not going to be any children anytime soon. Why would you wait? Would you, she asked in verse 13, would you refrain, therefore, from remarrying? The answer, of course, is no. No, my daughters, it's exceedingly bitter to me, for your sake, that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. She sees her predicament as being related or impacting them and causing theirs. So it grieves her that the unfaithfulness, if you will, of what's happened in their lives that's brought about all these deaths has impacted the two girls. She clearly loves them in return. So verse 14, they lifted up their voices and they wept again. This time Orpah kissed her mother-in-law and she left. But Ruth clung to her. Ruth is not ready to go home to her family. And so Naomi, trying to encourage her to do what's best for Ruth, continues in verse 15. See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Now notice the connection. Naomi wants to return to Israel, to God. The girls have had the option of choosing between going to Israel with Naomi or returning to their backgrounds. And so while Naomi has given seemingly a positive example of faith to them, Orpah has chosen to return to her parents and to her false gods, the deities of Moab. And so she's now imploring Ruth to do the same thing. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For wherever you go, I'll go. And where you lodge, I'll lodge. She is so committed to her mother-in-law that she wants to be with her, perhaps to take care of her, perhaps just to be with her. Wherever you go, I'll go. Wherever you lodge, I'll lodge. And then comes perhaps the most powerful statement in this section we're looking at this morning, the end of verse 16. Your people shall be my people. She's abandoning her people and adopting the people of Israel, and your God will be my God. I often teach this way in class, that Ruth epitomizes for us the first Gentile conversion in the Old Testament. Now, some people go, what about Rahab? Rahab's an important character. She, in fact, has a small role, if you will, to play in the book of Ruth. But when you read the story of Rahab back in the book of Joshua, she displays a knowledge of God. She's heard rumors about what God has done for the Israelites in the wilderness, but there's no outright explicit confession of faith. Here, in the case of Ruth, it's clear. She's abandoning her past, her people. She's adopting the people of God as her own. And Ruth is now claiming the God of Israel, Elohim, Your Elohim shall be my Elohim. And so she's claiming to follow God. Then where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me and worse, she says, if in fact I don't keep my word. And so she swears, takes an oath, a vow to go with Naomi wherever she goes and take on the faith and the religion of the people back home. When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. It was clear that Ruth was going with her no matter what. And so Ruth and Naomi together, marching home in defeat, alone, without their husbands, but back into the hands of God. We all roam, we all wander away at times. We all, if you're old enough to remember the old phrase, backslide. But we can always return to God. If we call out and return home, He'll welcome us like He does the prodigal son.